And now, as we begin this first session, which is dedicated to the notion of inspiration, we want to inspire you. What I'd like to do is introduce to you and have a conversation about someone who I absolutely am convinced will inspire you. Look.
College basketball shocked and saddened by Pat Summitt's announcement yesterday.
A towering figure in college basketball is about to teach her players a brand new lesson in grit.
Doctors at the Mayo Clinic diagnosed me with an early onset dementia, Alzheimer's type, at the age of 59.
It's one of those things that you remember where you were when Kennedy was shot. I remember that when I was 10 years old, and it was that kind of thing. I remember exactly where I was when I was told about the news about Pat.
I just sat there like stunned. Tears started coming down my face. And we talked, and she said, "You know what, Meek?" She goes, "I'm going to fight through this. I'm going to be okay." I said, "Coach, are you sure?" She's like, "Yeah, I got this. Dementia has never met an opponent like Pat Summitt."
You see this woman who has been so powerful and so on top of her game, and then all of a sudden you're like, you're helping her remember where a meeting is, and it's like, God, this woman should be coaching for 50 years. And yeah, it makes me, it makes me angry as hell. And then I turn around and I'm emotional. I mean, I get strength from how she handles it. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Pat Summitt is a part of who I am. Her last season was, I think, very special in a sense, and then also very hard in a way, because there was so much uncertainty, and the season just took on a whole new purpose, a whole new reason to even play. For it to come together with our SEC championship and, for us to give Pat one last time, for her really just to be celebrated for who she is, it was amazing.
There wasn't a Final Four that matched that feeling. And then at the same time, there was that sadness of, is this her last ladder? Will she have those scissors in her hands to cut down another net? And that was the unknown. And you didn't want it to be. You did not want it to be for anything in the world. But you couldn't help but think, this is her last trip up the ladder.
One of my all-time favorite teams.
And then the sadness of not being able to get by Baylor.
She is our John Wooden of women's basketball, and I don't think any coach wants to be a part of beating Pat Summitt in her last collegiate game. But you dig deep within your soul and you remember all the lessons that Pat has taught you, and that is, if you're a competitor, you go play regardless, and that's how I approached that game.
Being in that locker room after we lost to Baylor in the Elite Eight last year, it was definitely a heartache.
Ladies, y'all listen up. It wasn't for lack of effort. There's no doubt we all hurt. To be honest with you, losing just flat out sucks. Think about the good things that happened to this class and what's to come in the future. Anybody else want to say anything?
Thanks for the opportunity to coach. I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for you.
Y'all freshmen, take advantage of the opportunity. There's no better stage for women's basketball. There's no better stage.
I get very choked up when I think about her not marching the up and down the sidelines anymore, and just being her, being Pat.
For almost 4 decades, it has been a privilege to make an impact on the lives of 161 women who have worn the orange. I am so proud of them.
You know, 38 years ago this month,
Pat was announcing her retirement, and to hear this giant, this coaching legend, it was just a moment of incredible impact to me. I'll never forget it.
You know, it was hard. You know, because I didn't want to, but I felt like I needed to step down.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's why we have the foundation, and, you know, it gives me, you know, something to be proud of and stay involved with.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
Come on.
Hop up here. Come here, Sal.
They get upset. She's okay. It's okay.
It's all right.
Sorry,
good.
circle of support right here.
That's good. Yeah.
The thing about me being so strong now and helping out my mom now is that she gave that to me. And so you just do what you can do. You be the best you can be no matter what the circumstances, and you keep moving forward. Life hits you, you fall forward, and you just keep rolling, taking the punches. Keep on keeping on.
Here to help us tell the story and to experience more of the story of Pat Summitt is Michelle Marciniak, former championship player at the University of Tennessee. She's an entrepreneur and is serves on the advisory board of the Pat Summitt Foundation Fund for Alzheimer's. Please welcome Michelle Marciniak. Also with us is Dr. Ronald Petersen from the Department of Neurology and Director of Alzheimer's Disease Research here at Mayo Clinic. Please welcome them both. So we wanted to structure this as a conversation because I think in many ways you've allowed us into a family, in a sense, the University of Tennessee, the Pat Summitt family. My first question to you is, how do you discover that something like this is happening? There's no phone call in the night. It's subtle, it's nuanced. Michelle?
Well, you see it and you feel it. I remember when Pat's diagnosis was announced, when she announced it, it was probably a year and a half before that I started to see signs of sort of just deterioration of her mind. I can very vividly recall one time that I had, and this was the most amazing, I'll never forget this, but it was probably a year and a half before her diagnosis when I was in her house and I was staying there, as many people, typically do. And, we all gather by the kitchen, and after a game we'll all talk and then everybody goes to bed. Well, that night I had the most amazing conversation with Pat. And this was probably back in winter of 2010. And I mean, it was eyeball to eyeball. We talked about life. We talked about her dad. We talked about basketball. We talked about things that, as a player and coach, you really never get the chance to talk to your coach like that, and it was a very intimate conversation, one which I will never forget. And I remember going to bed that night thinking, wow, that's really cool, because maybe that's where a coach-player relationship eventually gets to. And I was so excited, and I slept so well that night. I woke up the next morning and again, go up to the kitchen, everybody's gathered, whoever was staying there. Pat has a very dear friend named Florence. She's about 91 years old. And Florence had gone to bed, so didn't get a chance to talk to her the night before. So she was sitting with a bunch of people at the Island Bar in the kitchen at Pat's house. And And she said, Michelle, how's your family? How's your mom and dad? And so we were just talking. Well, Pat walks in at that point, and she was fixing her coffee, and she was in her PJs, and just kind of listening to the conversation. When Florence asked me that, how's your mom and dad doing? And remembering the conversation we had the night before, Pat turns to me and she said, Michelle, how are your mom and dad? How are they doing? What's going on with them? And I froze. I could have dropped my coffee cup because what I realized is that something happened that night when I had the deepest conversation ever with her. And then that next morning, she had forgotten all about it. And for me, that was a year and a half before her diagnosis. I discovered it on my own, and then I started asking questions. I started to wonder, okay, so I turned to Mickey DeMoss, who's her longtime assistant coach, and she was in town for a little while, for a few days. And I just looked at Mickey and I said, what is going on?
What did she say?
She said, Michelle, I've noticed it too. Her staff probably noticed it first because they spent most time, you spend most of your time with your players and your staff, but you're still protected as a player, when it's your coach. I mean, there's still this layer, this wall, but your staff is your most, those are your people.
Right.
And you go to battle with your staff behind closed doors all the time. And so Mickey, she just looked at me straight in the eye and just said, Michelle, I know, I've been noticing it as well. And it was like from that point on, it was, I was tipped off to kind of be looking for some things, but I still didn't know what it was. We just knew there were some things that were happening that it just wasn't typical things that Pat would you can't find your keys, like losing her way, like to try to drive to get to the office, repeating.
Well, the image of her preparing her coffee in her PJs and terrifying you in that way by not remembering that conversation that was so meaningful to you. Mm-hmm. That's a story that makes you want to pause and take a breath. My inclination now is to ask the doctor a question, but I have to ask you one more, Michelle. How at odds with what you understood about the character and strength of Pat Summitt was this idea of mental weakness that you began to see?
I just couldn't believe it. I mean, if I could describe what this woman was like to play for, I mean, it was a nightmare, and I mean that in a good way. I
Missed
mean,
nothing.
She won.
Yeah.
She won games, she won championships. You set foot on campus, you were there to win a national championship. You were not there to win basketball games. You were there to cut down nets and win championships. She spoke in that language alone. And she was the best thing that's ever happened to me. My athletic career took off in a whole different direction because of her. She was as tough as you could possibly imagine. And yet, then all of a sudden you see her disengaged. When before, she looked at you and you just wanted to look away because she had such a piercing stare. Now you're looking at her and she's looking away because she is not as confident and she's not as self-assured and she doesn't know how to carry on a conversation anymore. And I mean, it's devastating when you know someone that well and you just you see the physical deterioration of their brain right in front of your eyes. It was an absolute shock.
Doctor, how hard is it for families and loved ones in a close circle like this to begin to go from sharing these kinds of stories to taking action to really taking a look at this as a medical event?
It's very difficult. I mean, I think that sometimes families appreciate these things are happening, particularly if they've seen it in their family previously. So many of us baby boomers out here right now may have had people in our families or friends in their 70s, 80s who had a little difficulty later on. And now people in their 50s and 60s are saying, gee, mom or dad went down that road, grandma, grandpa went down that road. I'm having trouble with my car keys, so where's my car in the ramp and things of that nature. which are probably indices of typical forgetfulness of aging. We all do that. We're stressed, we're wondering about a bunch of different things, and we misplace objects here and there. But now people are starting to wonder, is this the first sign of the conversation in the morning after? And is this an instance of something that might be meaningful later on? So I think on the one hand, many people are worried about this. On the other hand, you kind of have to take a step back and relax. Not everybody's going to get Alzheimer's disease because there is some forgetfulness with normal aging. And our job is to try to discriminate that worrisome forgetfulness from typical forgetfulness. So but it can be very difficult for families, and I appreciate that.
As a patient, without violating any confidences, obviously, how would you describe Pat Summitt?
Well, when she and Tyler came a couple of years ago, and again, Pat's given us permission to disclose some of these pieces of information. I mean, as Michelle described, it was somewhat typical insofar as this incidental forgetfulness, and then it kind of got worse. And I think that what Michelle described so well is the issue of something that's really meaningful. When a person starts to forget something that's really important, something they probably processed fairly deeply, but then later on can't recall it, that's a bit worrisome. So Tyler and Pat came and we talked about these issues, and Tyler brought up instances of, gee, Mom would remember this game, what we did right, what we did wrong, and what we should be doing in the next game. When we watched the films together, she would make some comments, but there was clearly something that was missing. That perception of what's happening, the broad view of the team did this, the other team did that, we should have done this and we didn't. That was sort of vanishing gradually. So in that sense, it was a chronology of what was disintegrating very, very gradually in her.
In cases like this, Michelle, does love fight with respect, in the sense that love makes you want to care and nurture and help and shield someone you love, but respect makes you want to not believe that they're capable of any weakness? Mm-hmm. How do love and respect sort of compete?
It's an interesting question. As a coach-player relationship, it changes over time, and you always have, you would hope, but you always have the utmost respect for your coach, which I did from day one. But the relationship changes where you all of a sudden become, a woman in the real world, and a businesswoman and a professional. And I coached for a little while, so I actually had to compete against her. And that was even worse of a nightmare than playing for her, just trying to compete against her on the sidelines. But I think when I started my business, and she became very, I can give you another example of when I saw that she was just trying to reach out to me. And that love was always there with us. There was a little love-hate, but there was always the love that was there. And she was reaching out to me about my business in a way that she never did with my coaching career. And I'm thinking, well, I'm one of the Lady Vols in our extended family that went off and started their own business. So I'm thinking it's because I'm doing something different. And probably it was, to a certain extent, but she was calling me a few nights, and then another few nights, talking about the business, talking about how can I help you. And this was in that year and a half, back a year and a half before the diagnosis. And at that point, I was like, wow, she just cares. Like, this is so incredible. I'm seeing this. And then within 5 minutes, she would say the same thing again. She'd say, so how's the business going? And I just answered that question. And then she'd say, I want to hook you up with this person. I think you need to talk to them. And then it would reset again. And she'd say, so how's the business going? And it just kept hitting me with waves and waves of, I just became so sad through this entire process. And then I wanted to protect her. So to get to your question, I just wanted to love her through it. I wanted to speak for her. I wanted to do anything I possibly could as a former player you know, and as a former point guard, played for, you know, I was a coach. I was her on the floor when I played. And at that point, when I started seeing signs, I just wanted to step up for her and be a mouthpiece, you know, so that I could let people know that the person that they're seeing now is not the person that she was, you know, and trying to carry on her legacy through, you know, my voice, through voices of other Lady Vols, you know, through what Dr. Petersen is doing, through our foundation, anything that can continue to promote Alzheimer's, Pat's Foundation, and our involvement. What have we done in Pat's life, and what can we continue to do because of this?
Lady Vols, of course, are the Lady Volunteers at the University of Tennessee. Pat didn't have to go public with this. She volunteered to make this a public struggle. What went into that decision, do you know?
I think that was probably one of the toughest decisions she's ever had to make in her life. I mean, there's a certain amount of pride. When you're the best that's ever coached the game, she's the most winningest coach in male or female basketball history. She's got some pride. Now, she had humble pride, but whenever you're highly accomplished, it would be I would liken it to this. It'd be like taking one of Michael Jordan's arms away, you know, and like all of a sudden almost handicapping him and saying, okay, now still go and play basketball. You're going to be different. You know, and Pat experienced the same thing. She experienced this deterioration in her mind, and all of a sudden she was starting to see signs, and we all were, of her becoming different, and it changed her. And, you know, I think what she did to come out and speak publicly about, you know, just raising awareness and her own story was extremely courageous. And I commend her for it, because I know how when you're so accomplished and your whole life, we are what we do. A lot of people don't like to admit that, but what we do is who we are. And, you know, you define your career through, you have a career, and you're defined through that career. And Pat Summitt was defined through her incredible basketball career, and just a legend, you know, Presidential Medal of Freedom kind of career, you know, in the end. And for her to come out and actually fight this publicly just kind of told you what I saw as a player in her, which is we're going to do this, you're going to show up, and we're going to do this the right way. We're going to do it to the best of our ability, and we're going to win. And that's her approach with her Alzheimer's diagnosis as well.
What do you think constitutes winning in this context, Doctor? In the sense of, is it about awareness? Is it about public awareness? Is it about her awareness of her own condition and deterioration and mitigating the pain and suffering that comes from that? What is winning here?
It's all of the above, what you mentioned, John. I think with regard to what Pat has done for the disease and for the field is this acknowledgement that in my late 50s, I've developed this disease that typically is thought in the general public to be a disease of grandma and grandpa. In their 70s and 80s, well, grandma got a little senile, she got a little funny at the end, but what do you expect? She's 85. That's a disease now. We recognize that that's Alzheimer's disease. That's not normal aging. So as we age, we don't have to develop these cognitive inefficiencies and problems. So for her to admit this at age 59 is really extraordinary, because the general public can say, gee, if Pat Summitt at the top of her field can get it at age 59, I can get it, the person next door can get it. So one of the biggest roadblocks we have in Alzheimer's disease right now is that acknowledgement, the acceptance that this is a disease, this is not just something that grandma and grandpa got, but in fact is a real problem for the country. And I don't want to bore people with statistics, put you to sleep in no time, but the fact of the matter is that this country now spends $200 billion a year, with a B, caring for people with Alzheimer's disease. 2/3 of that comes from the federal government. If we could turn this disease around a little bit, cure it would be great. But I mean, push back the onset, slow the progression, the economic impact, not to mention the personal and familial impact, would be absolutely enormous. And that's what she could do. Now, her awareness and the public's acceptance that, gee, this is a disease process, I think would be huge.
People who experience Alzheimer's in their families, among spouses, mates, loved ones, parents, describe a situation where the person they knew is gone in some sense. It's not a clinical term. Right. It's a story I've heard told. I don't know how to evaluate it, but I'll just ask you straight up. Is Pat still with us?
Somewhat. Not fully. You know, it's hard because I wish she was still here. I wish she were.
This is, of course, a disease of all of us. It's
Yep.
not just, I mean, we can see it on your face. It's not just Pat. It's all of us experiencing this. What is our responsibility as a community, as a larger family, to care for those who've done so much for us?
I think it's support. I think you have to love them through it. You know, you need to put them in the comfort of their home, put them where they're most comfortable. Don't try to over-challenge them or, you know, do something that would frustrate them. You know, don't ask a memory question if they're not good at memory right now. Let them do their games and do their puzzles and work on their memory that way. But you only discourage, and me personally, I would only discourage Pat. If I said, Pat, do you remember the game that we played in 1995? You know, no. You know, and it puts her in a position to answer a question that she's uncomfortable with. So I have found that that's something that is very helpful, just flat out loving them until the end.
Did you ever ask her, what does it feel like inside? Anything like that? Does she respond?
That's where the respect comes from, right. I think, because I've tried, you know, to ask her questions, but she shuts down pretty easily.
And that's her right.
It is, but she's not able to feel and think through things like she maybe could have 5 years ago.
What do you think the lessons are about caregiving, about our responsibility in communities for the health of everyone that come from this experience of Alzheimer's, as you've seen it manifested in families and in communities, and with the statistics that you know, thankfully give to us? There's nothing boring about those statistics.
Right. No, it's an incredible honor in one hand to care for these people, but an incredible burden on individuals and on society as well. So I think most people and most families accept these individuals, take them in, but at some point there's a breaking. That is that sometimes families cannot do it any longer, and that provides a great deal of angst for them because they say, gee, this is mom and dad. They've always taken care of me. It's my turn. But I have my family to care for. I have my career and all this. So there's an incredible amount of tension out there. So I think society really has to step up to the plate here and deal with these issues, both monetarily and personally, because these are going to be only increasing in tremendous proportions over the coming years.
To end, I'll just ask both of you, if we can solve this, we can do what?
I'll just say...
I'll let the doctor answer
No,
that.
I mean, this would be... I think this is the disease of our generation. Because if we don't do something about this, it's going to overwhelm the healthcare system and all of us as individuals and family members. This is the disease that could bring down the healthcare system. On the other hand, the positive light, if we make a little bit of an increase in inroad in research that is going to push back the onset of that could be enormously prosperous for, obviously, individuals and families, but for the healthcare economy. Washington kind of gets that, but it's not going to be today, tomorrow. It might be on the next person's term, who gets the credit for me making the difficult decisions right here and now. There are some in Congress who are willing to make that step. And we're fortunate here in Minnesota. Senator Amy Klobuchar is one of those individuals who really wants to make the difficult decisions now, because the research changes and findings that will occur in the short term are going to be enormously paying off in the long term.
And if I may add, if we can solve this, we may also find, as you've demonstrated so well this evening, our sense of humanity in confronting a huge societal problem. Dr. Petersen and Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It's really been a lot.